So I'm here in my Senate office with Skye Perryman. Skye Perryman leads Democracy Forward, which is really the tip of the spear when it comes to bringing these legal cases to shut down the illegal operations being taken by Elon Musk and Donald Trump. And I thought it was important for her to come be my guest during this joint session of Congress because the president is going to be talking about lots of these illegal operations, and we want him to know, we want our colleagues to know, we want the country to know that people are fighting back. We're fighting back in court, we're fighting back in Congress, we're fighting back in communities across the country. But we couldn't ask for a better guest to talk about the fight in the courts against this spree of illegal activity than Skye Perryman. So let me just start, Skye, by thanking you for being here.
Thank you.
But thank you for starting Democracy Forward. What motivated you to do this?
Well, we were started in the first months of the last Trump administration, where there were so many things that the administration was doing that really harmed people and communities. Many folks know about the Muslim ban or about some of these more high-profile actions they took, but they were taking actions across the board that were raising costs on American families, that were threatening our air and water quality by trying to roll back environmental protections and climate protections. And so Democracy Forward sprung into action. I was a lawyer on the team at the time with a range of other lawyers who left their jobs to, I think, have the best client we could have, which is the American people and democracy. We've expanded our work since then. We work in a lot of states and communities across the country where there is this extremism and misinformation. And then, of course, we were ready to go on day one, unfortunately, when we started seeing that this administration had not learned lessons from the past, but was going to continue a pattern of unlawful and harmful activity.
Well, I wish your work had not become necessary, but as you just said, it is absolutely vital now. To protecting our Constitution, our democracy, protecting the American people. So when you saw Project 2025, did you see that as the playbook that Donald Trump would put into place if they got into the White House again?
We knew what we were looking at when we saw Project 2025 because our team had actually already been tracking. We knew what they did the first time. We know what their allies are trying to do in states across the country where they're rolling back people's rights. And so when Project 2025 came out, there was no question in our mind that Donald Trump, even though he lied to the American people and said that he didn't know anything about Project 2025, that if he was elected, he would seek to accelerate it. So we used that as a way of planning how we could protect the American people's rights in court if these policies were accelerated. And then we also knew that Trump likes to be a master of chaos because he feels like he can gain more power and frustrate people and deprive people of hope. And so we knew there would be something that wasn't going to be on the so-called bingo card. And that, of course, was Doge and Elon Musk. But because we knew that something like that would happen, we were able to prepare and get some lawyers who've been able to get into court and help protect people.
Yeah, I'm so glad you had that foresight. And thank you for reminding everybody that on the campaign trail, when candidate Trump was asked about Project 2025, it's like, who are they? I don't know who they are. He said he was going to focus on bringing prices down day one. But in fact, it was all about implementing Project 2025, which he didn't mention because I think he knows how unpopular it is.
He knows that. And what we know is that among conservative Americans, liberal Americans, moderate Americans, independent Americans, that Project 2025 was a toxic hot potato. Nobody wanted to touch it in the last election, and that's for a reason, because there's not support for it. So there's no mandate for this extremism. And we're seeing that. We're seeing people making their voices heard. We're representing many groups in court that may not agree on everything, but they all agree that this extremism is harmful and needs to be stopped. Yeah. And I think you're seeing that in the town halls too.
You are. You're seeing more and more people rise up at these town halls, confront their members of Congress and say, what the hell are you doing? Because as you just said, Project 2025 was toxic.
Right.
And yet that is their priority now. So let's talk about some of your major cases that you're working on. And how many cases roughly would you say you're working on?
Well,
now?
we have filed over 25 legal actions since inauguration. Some of those are what we call motions for intervention, where we're protecting policies that the last administration implemented that this administration isn't protecting. Some of them are affirmative cases. Over a dozen are lawsuits against the Trump administration itself. And so, we're working across every issue, but some of the real important ones right now, the administration tried to stop essential services across the country so that people would wake up in fear that they weren't going to be able to take their kids to Head Start or weren't going to be able to get their Meals on Wheels. We were able to get into court and stop that nationwide. Unlawful and harmful. That's the combination that gets us into court. The president on day one started signing executive orders, and he signed one that basically tries to make himself a king and says that if you don't agree with him on diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, if you have a different perspective, that you could potentially even be prosecuted by the Department of Justice or that your federal funding could be cut off. And so we went in and were able to block that. We've had to go in to keep ICE out of churches on behalf of diverse religious communities. And then, of course, I know this is near and dear to your heart and to the people in your state, but the federal workforce, the men and women who serve us every day, they are being targeted unfairly by this administration. And so we are in court and we're in the Merit Systems Protection Board every day fighting for people, and we've already received some really good rulings there.
So let's take each of those and zero in a little bit more on them. So the first one you mentioned was in response to the executive order that the president issued, essentially freezing, putting a halt to funds that have been appropriated by Congress, important to our communities, right? I mean, so I started hearing from firefighters, and I also did hear from Head Start programs, and I heard from Boys and Girls Clubs. I heard from, a lot of community-based organizations who use this money for great public purposes, and they put a kibosh to that. So you went into court, and you got the nationwide, injunction now on that activity. Can you talk about the legal, why is that illegal?
There are so many reasons why it's unlawful. Let me say that's one thing with this administration is they violate a bunch of laws. So sort of like which one do you go into court on? And I want us just to give a shout out to the people on our team at Democracy Forward who, when they saw this memo come out and we started hearing and we knew it was going to be hard for people the next day, they wanted to implement it by 5 p.m. the next day. They said, this is not lawful and we're going to go to court and stop it and work through the night. With our clients who mobilized and worked through the night to get into court the next morning. But there were a range of issues with that. One is, of course, the one that you all in Congress talk a lot about is impoundment. And we didn't even have to actually argue that in this case because there were so many other laws they violated. But that is an important, it's an important for people to be following that this is a president that wants to control funds that Congress, that the people have said need to go to certain programs. And that's unlawful and unconstitutional.
Right. Presidents don't get to cherry pick, right?
They don't
get to cherry pick the law and say, I like that one, but I reject that one. Right? It's not a la carte menu.
And they also don't get to ignore Congress. They don't get to ignore we the people.
So let's get to the very important cases to protect patriotic civil servants. Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. The administration on day one started targeting our civil servants, the men and women who serve all of us. They've done that in a few ways. They tried to impose Schedule F, which is will seek to gut the civil service. That was in Project 2025, which of course they didn't know anything about. We filed 2 lawsuits on that, and those are pending. They came out with very arbitrary firings, trying to fire people who were early in their government service, probationary employees, and we've already received a good ruling from the Merit Systems Protection Board saying that that was unlawful and likely violates a range of personnel practices. We're working to now expand that ruling to more civil servants. There's also been a federal district court in another case that some of our partners are involved in that has said that this was unlawful. So we have those cases. And then they're also seeking to decimate our federal agencies. So everything from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau to USAID to the Department of Education. And part of that, they're trying to undermine civil servants, to target their jobs. And so we're fighting on that front too. But we're seeing really positive developments in the courts. We want civil servants to know that there are people that have their backs because they've had our backs for so long serving the American people. So,
well, thank you. Thank you for what you're doing to protect democracy, the civil servants who do such important work on behalf of the American people, and to ultimately shut down this illegal Elon Musk operation. Thank you very much. Great to have you here.